They laughed when they saw me standing there, rejected and humiliated. But they didn't know what was coming next. I stood in the shadows, key in hand, watching my family arrive at the beach house they thought they owned. They had banished me from the reunion, said I wasn't good enough to be part of their lives. Every single one of them had turned their backs on me over the years. The family who mocked my struggle, belittled my dreams, and humiliated me in front of everyone. But what they didn't know was that everything they thought they had was now mine. As I watched them walk up to the house, smiling, chatting, completely unaware, I felt the rush of emotions rise within me. The years of being treated like I was invisible. The years of not being good enough. They never saw me as worthy. But now, I held the power. They didn't know that the beach house they had always wanted, I was the one who secretly bought it. They didn't know I was watching them right now, about to open the door. I watched as they reached the front gate, unaware that the key in my hand was about to change everything. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. The revenge they never saw coming. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at their table. I was going to own the whole damn house. I unlocked the door, and with a slow turn of the handle, I let them in. The look on their faces when they stepped inside. Pure shock. But I wasn't done yet. This was only the beginning. Before I tell you how they reacted, do you think they'll even realize what's about to happen next? Hit the like button, subscribe, and stay with me, because you won't believe what happens when the family learns the truth. As they stepped inside, their voices grew quieter. They were looking around, trying to make sense of the space they'd walked into. The beach house, the one they had always dreamed of, was suddenly theirs to claim, or so they thought. But what they didn't know was that their precious reunion wasn't just about catching up. It was about to become their worst nightmare. I stayed hidden in the background, watching their every move. My heart raced, but I didn't let them see a thing. I was in control now. They glanced at the luxurious furniture, the panoramic windows, and the sparkling ocean view that only a few people could ever dream of. Their eyes widened, disbelief setting in. I could almost hear their thoughts. How? Why? Then, just as they were starting to relax, as they convinced themselves everything was fine, I made my move. I walked out, casually, into their view. My uncle, who'd always been the loudest to criticize me, looked at me, his expression morphing from confusion to something darker. His eyes searched for a reason why I was standing there, as if he couldn't understand how someone like me could be inside this house, let alone own it. "Why are you here?" he asked, his tone harsh. "You weren't invited." I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I let the silence hang in the air. My family, all of them, looked from one another, clearly unsure how to react. They'd never seen me like this, calm, confident, and clearly in charge. The tables had turned, but not in the way they expected. "Did you think you could just leave me out of everything?" I said, my voice steady, each word carrying the weight of everything I had been through. "Did you think I wouldn't make something of myself?" They were speechless, their arrogance now replaced by doubt. My cousin, who had always acted like the perfect golden child, finally spoke up. This is your house?" I smiled. "It is. Now!" The tension was thick. I could see their minds racing, trying to understand how they had missed everything. How had they never seen me building my empire while they laughed? How had they never realized I was working in silence, in the background, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal the truth? But I wasn't ready to let them off the hook just yet. This was only the beginning. I slowly walked to the balcony, my family trailing behind me, their faces a mix of shock and embarrassment. They had no idea what I was about to reveal next. And trust me, they were about to feel the sting of their own ignorance. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. What would you do if the people who mocked you were suddenly forced to face your success? Stay tuned, because this is about to get even crazier. The silence in the room was deafening. They stood there, frozen, as I stepped onto the balcony, looking out at the vast ocean stretching before us. The waves crashed softly against the shore, the sound oddly calming, almost mocking the tension that hung between us. They couldn't even bring themselves to speak, as if they were too afraid to ask how I'd done it, how I had gone from being the family joke to the one who controlled the future they had all dreamed of. I could feel their eyes on me, questioning, trying to piece together the mystery. They were angry, but they couldn't say it aloud. Not yet. But I knew the rage was bubbling beneath the surface. My cousin's voice broke the silence, his words dripping with disbelief. You did this?" He could barely get the words out, turned to face him, my gaze cold, but there was a fire burning within me. "I did," I said. "And I've been doing it in silence, while you all were too busy laughing at me. It felt good. No, amazing, to finally let it out. The years of being underestimated, ignored, and ridiculed now seemed so distant, almost laughable. But I wasn't laughing. This wasn't about proving a point. It was about showing them the power of what happens when you work quietly in the background. "But how?" my aunt stammered. "You were always the outsider." I shook my head, my lips curling into a small smile. "You were too busy focusing on everything but me. You thought I was just a failure. But now, who's the failure?" The words stung as they left my mouth, and I watched their faces twist in disbelief. They were starting to see the cracks in the perfect image they'd painted for themselves. Just as they were about to speak, a knock echoed from the front door. I glanced at the clock. It was the moment I had been waiting for. This wasn't just a family reunion anymore. It was the moment that would leave them stunned, speechless. I motioned for one of them to answer the door. No one moved. The air was too thick with tension, and I loved every second of it. The doorbell rang again, and then I heard it, a faint sound of footsteps approaching. But these weren't the footsteps of my family. They were from someone else. Someone important. I stepped forward, past my shocked relatives, and made my way to the door. I turned the handle, letting the sound of the door creaking open echo in the room. There, standing before me, was the last person anyone would expect. Well, I said, a grin creeping onto my face. "Looks like someone else is joining the reunion." Before I open the door fully, you have to ask yourself, who could possibly show up now, and what does it mean for the family? You won't believe the twist that's coming next. Stay with me because this story is far from over. I pushed the door open, and there he was, my lawyer, a man none of my family knew. The shock on their faces was enough to make even the walls of the beach house tremble. He was dressed sharply, as usual, and carried a briefcase, which made my family even more confused. I could feel their eyes narrowing, their thoughts racing as they tried to make sense of the situation. "Good evening, everyone," he said, his voice smooth but with an undeniable authority. "I hope I'm not interrupting." My uncle, still trying to process everything, opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he just stared at the lawyer, as if expecting some sort of explanation for this unexpected guest. "What's going on here?" my cousin finally blurted out, his voice shaking. "Who is he?" I glanced at the lawyer, who nodded slightly, and then I turned to face my family. "This is my lawyer," I said casually. "He's here because, as of today, I'm officially the sole owner of everything you thought you controlled. The house, the land, the business, everything." The silence that followed was unbearable. They couldn't believe it. They refused to believe it. I could see the disbelief and anger in their eyes. This wasn't the way they thought it would go. They never imagined I would outsmart them, let alone beat them at their own game. Your lawyer? My aunt's voice cracked, disbelief coating every word. You can't be serious. I nodded, leaning against the doorframe as if everything was normal. I'm more than serious. In fact, this is just the beginning. The lawyer opened his briefcase, pulled out a set of documents, and handed them to me. As you can see, I continued, my heart racing with excitement. Everything is in order. The house is officially under my name, and all the assets you thought you were entitled to have now been transferred. One of my cousins, still in shock, stammered. You mean, you really own this? Yes, I said, savoring the moment, watching their faces fall with each word. And that's not all. In fact, I've come to officially announce that I'm in charge now. Not you. The tension that had been building finally exploded into chaos. My family was speechless. My aunt, who had always been the one to make cruel jokes about my failures, now stood there, her face pale, struggling to find words. My uncle, still too proud to admit defeat, finally spoke up. You think this is over? He growled. You think we'll just bow down to you? I shook my head, my voice quiet but full of conviction. No. This isn't about bowing down. This is about you finally realizing that everything you've taken for granted is now mine. All of it. And I'm not going anywhere. I could see the defeat in their eyes. It was over for them. The power had shifted. But just as they were about to turn and leave, something else happened. A voice, one that none of them expected, came from behind me. The doorbell rang once more, cutting through the heavy tension in the room. Before I reveal who else is here and what that means, I'll leave you with this question. What if this last twist is the one thing they can never recover from? Stay tuned, because this is where everything changes. Again. The doorbell rang once more, its sharp chime piercing the stillness in the room. My family, already struggling to come to terms with everything that had just unfolded, turned towards the door again. Their expressions were a mix of confusion, frustration, and panic. None of them understood what was happening, nor did they know how to deal with it. I turned slowly, feeling the power shift one last time. I motioned to the door, and as I did, I saw their faces pale even more. The door swung open, and standing there, framed in the doorway, was someone who no one could have ever predicted. It was my father. The man who had walked out on me when I was a child. The man who had treated me like I didn't matter. The man who had never even acknowledged my existence. And now, here he was, standing in front of me, his face filled with shock and guilt. I didn't know, he whispered, his voice shaking. I had no idea. My family, for the first time in years, seemed to shrink back. My uncle, the loudest critic, was now speechless. My aunt, who had always been the queen of criticism, stood frozen in place, unable to process what was happening. My father, looking at the scene in front of him, spoke again, his voice filled with regret. You're the one who owns this? His eyes flickered with disbelief, guilt, and something else. Guilt for abandoning me when I needed him most. I stepped forward, not to comfort him, but to make my point clear. You left me. You thought I would never amount to anything. You thought I would always need you. But here I am. I built this on my own. Without you. Without any of you. The words hung in the air, and I could feel the weight of them settle in. My father had nothing to say. He was just a shadow of the man who had once cast me aside. His regret was too deep for words. I looked at my family, their faces filled with a mix of disbelief and regret. The roles had completely reversed. They had treated me as if I was nothing. But now, they were the ones left standing in the shadows of the success I had built for myself. The family that had once turned its back on me was now forced to reckon with the truth. I had done everything they said I couldn't do, and I had done it without their help, without their approval. The silence in the room was deafening. No one knew what to say next. My father finally broke the silence, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." I looked at him, then at the rest of my family, and said simply, "It's too late for apologies now, but you'll remember this day. You'll remember when you doubted me, when you mocked me, and now I'm the one in control." They all stood there, paralyzed by the enormity of what had just happened. My father, my relatives, they had no words. They had no way to come back from this. As I stood there, the weight of everything I had endured finally felt worth it. I had been the underdog, the one who everyone had counted out. But now, I had shown them exactly who I was. The doors of the beach house closed behind me, and for the first time, I finally felt free.